Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's United States Department of Energy Loan Programs Office webinar. What we're doing today is introducing to you the new program guidance for the Title 17 Clean Energy Financing Program. As was mentioned, I'm Gretchen Kittle, and I'm Acting Director of the Outreach and Business Development Division at the Loan Programs Office. I peeked at the registration before logging in, saw lots of familiar names and lots of new ones. So welcome. And we're looking forward to exploring the developments in Title 17. Now, this program is a critical tool for accelerating the deployment of clean energy and decarbonation technologies across the U.S. We're creating good jobs, strengthening supply chains, and enabling an effective energy transition for the nation. Now, the Title 17 program guidance that we've just issued provides a comprehensive overview of the program. And then by the end of this webinar, here's my promise to you. You stick with us, and by the end of the webinar, you'll know what's changed from the previous Title 17 solicitations, what's new in this guidance, and the answers to some questions you've already asked us about how this guidance is going to affect you. And then we'll give you something to look forward to as well. We're not going to have Q&A happen during this webinar, except for the fact that we invite you to send us your questions by chat. And then what we're going to do is respond on the LPO website soon after the webinar. All right, now before we move on to the next slide, let me give you a quick glossary, especially for those who are not as familiar with the program. When I say LPO, referring to the Loan Programs Office. Title 17 is the short name for the loan guarantee programs that LPO administers under the authority that was created in Title 17 of the Energy Policy Act of 2005 as amended. Now we're going to talk about two sections in Title 17 today, and those are 1703 and 1706. Also, since 2005, Title 17 has been revised by subsequent legislation, and there are two acts that I'll refer to during this webinar. First is the IIJA, and that refers to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act back from 2021. Next, the more recent one is IRA or IRA, which refers to the Inflation Reduction Act that was put forth in 2022. When we talk about the United States, that's the short name for including the 50 states, the District of Columbia, Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, Guam, American Samoa, and any other territory or possession of the United States of America. And then one last thing. We're talking about the guidance today, and in addition to the guidance, LPO has issued an interim final rule, which you'll hear us refer to as the IFR. We encourage you to look at the IFR. It contains proposed amendments to the regulations related to the Title 17 program. We're open for you to solicit comments before July 31st. So at the end of this presentation, we'll show you the links where you can do that, and we just encourage you to take a look at that and provide us your feedback. All right, let's go to the next slide. What's our value proposition? Why do you want to consider the Loan Programs Office? Under Title 17, LPO can provide loan guarantees for projects that support clean energy deployment and energy infrastructure reinvestment in the U.S. We're essentially a bank within the Department of Energy, with one big difference from commercial lenders. At LPO, we provide access to patient capital and flexible financing and a committed DOE partnership through the life of the loan because we are here not to generate a profit, we're here to achieve a mission. What's that mean for you? Well, the only way that we can achieve our mission is that you're successful in yours. That's why we can provide long-term senior debt for the construction of clean energy projects that you might find challenging to get financing for in the commercial markets. To obtain adequate, flexible debt financing on competitive terms could be a challenge for those projects. And that's what we're here for. And how do we manage that? Well, we have the benefit of having the Department of Energy behind us. So we leverage considerable in-house expertise to support these large-scale project deployments. We deliver long-term, flexible debt financing on competitive terms, and we serve as your committed partner for the life of your loan. Now, another way you might hear us referring to this is that we are the bridge to bankability. There are projects out there that are critical to achieving the decarbonization of the energy sector and achieving a stronger domestic energy supply chain. for this nation, for the good of us and the good of the world, actually. And the Title 17 program, the Clean Energy Financing Program, is central to our achieving this mission. So that's where that's what we bring to enable the ideas that are generated by the private sector to move forward. When they might be challenged in one way, we help you over that and help you to be able to prove the technologies that you're bringing to us for potential financing. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Now, this is the big question. How does this, I noticed that there are a number of applicants who are in the audience, and you're thinking, all right, how does this new guidance affect me? So I'll give you the answer up front. You do not need to reapply. For those of you who have already submitted an application, you don't need to reapply, right? Now, this guidance does two things. What it does is consolidates and replaces the solicitations that had been in place for the Title 17 programs. Most of you will know these by their names of the Innovative Clean Energy Solicitation, the Advanced Nuclear Solicitation, and the Advanced Fossil Solicitation. These solicitations have been consolidated and replaced by the guidance. They're still available on the web in an archive section for your reference. However, when you're looking for information about how to conduct your application, etc., go to the guidance and to the IFR. Now, that's one thing that the guidance does. The second thing that it does is to incorporate new authorities that were established by those acts I mentioned before, the IIJA and the IRA. Okay, let's come back now to how the guidance affects you. If you're an applicant and you have officially submitted a Part 1 or Part 2 application into the LPO's application portal, you don't need to resubmit. The prior determinations that have been made with respect to the eligibility of these applications do not change. If you're an applicant in Part 2, you might find that you'll need to provide additional information, but that would be in line with the new requirements from the guidance and new possibilities. So we might ask you to provide additional information, but we are not asking you to reapply. Okay, let's go to the next slide. What we have in the guidance is an introduction of four categories under which Title 17 is going to provide its flexible financing for eligible projects. Now, the first two categories support the types of projects that many of you are already familiar with. The second two are new as of the program guidance issuance, and they reflect the recent changes from recent legislation. So briefly, categories 1 and 2, as you can see on the slide, are innovative energy and innovative supply chain. They are both under Section 1703 of the Title 17. Innovative energy category includes projects that deploy a qualifying new or significantly improved technology that is technically proven, but is not widely commercialized in the United States. The next one, the innovative supply chain category, includes projects that either employ a new or significantly improved technology in the manufacturing process itself, or manufacture a component that represents a new or significantly improved technology. We'll go over this in a little bit more detail, but that's just to give you an overview of what you're seeing in the new areas, the new categories in the guidance. Now, we have, excuse me, with the innovative supply chain technologies, they're already eligible under Title 17 in Section 1703. But this new guidance improves the applicants, improves your ability to understand how it is that LPO will evaluate whether a project meets the innovation requirements and whether it meets the emissions reduction requirements, because they're evaluated slightly differently than in that first category, innovative energy. So what we're trying to do is to clarify this for you to make the process easier on your end for completing the application. Again, we'll come back to this in more detail later on. Now, the last two categories that you see on this page are new as of the program guidance. Now, and then before we get into those, note that the first two categories that we talked about, the top two, innovative energy and innovative supply chain, have an innovation requirement. So that has not changed. There's the innovation requirement there. Now, these second two categories do not have that innovation requirement. Okay, so let's talk about those for just a second. The third one you see here, the State Energy Financing Institution, or SEFI category of projects, is authorized under the IIJA. This category supports the deployment of qualifying clean energy technology in projects that are receiving meaningful financial support or credit enhancements from an entity that is within a state agency or financing authority. The fourth category, another new one, is the Energy Infrastructure Reinvestment, or EIR category. This is an exciting one. It's in a new section, section 1706, under Title 17, and it supports projects that retool, repower, repurpose, or replace energy infrastructure that has ceased operations, or that enable operating energy infrastructure to avoid, reduce, utilize, or sequester air pollutants or emissions of greenhouse gases. I should have given you this definition earlier, but I'll give it now. When we talk about energy infrastructure, we mean facilities that are used for electric generation or transmission, or facilities that are used for fossil fuel related production, processing, and delivery. So that we will refer to infrastructure in quite a few places, and that's what we're talking about. Okay, let's go to the next slide, where we can review general program eligibility under Title 17 before we get into the detail on these categories. Now, under Title 17, any potential borrower with a highly qualified and eligible project that meets the administration's national security and economic competitiveness objectives may receive a loan guarantee subject to the underwriting and evaluation criteria for this program, and that we describe in a high level in this presentation. Now, a lot of these requirements are familiar to you. You can look at the left-hand column on this page. The project has to be located in the U.S. It has to be energy related. It must have a reasonable prospect of repayment. It's got to meet the GHG emissions reduction requirements, and it must involve technically viable and commercial ready technology. So these are requirements that I think that all of you are familiar with. Now, if you look at numbers 6 and 7 in the left-hand column, I want to spend a little bit of time on those. The first is a new requirement. Now, in your Part 2 application, you're required to submit a community benefits plan. Here, you're going to have the chance to identify the community benefits that are resulting from the project. These benefits can span economic, social, environmental, and equity considerations. Here, too, you can identify potential harms that are going to need to be mitigated over the life of the project. This is something where we would expect that as we manage your loan through its life in our loan portfolio, that you will be reporting on elements of this information as part of your ongoing reporting requirements. The other one that I'd like to talk about is number 7, the not benefit from prohibited federal support. Now, this is a question that comes up often, especially with all of the legislation and programs and commitment to benefiting energy and environmental projects that are out there. We want we're always ready to sort through which ones can work with the loan program and which ones can't. There's in the guidance, you'll see that it reinforces the federal support restriction, or often referred to as the FSR. Under the FSR, DOE cannot issue loan guarantees to projects that are expected to benefit from certain other forms of federal support. The forms of federal support that I'm talking about could include grants, cooperative agreements, or other loan guarantees from federal agencies or entities. Now, there are some federal benefits that are allowable to be in conjunction with the loan programs, office loan. And those are, I'll specify the federal tax benefits, including energy production and investment tax credits. Those are excluded from the restriction. And those are, so this is something where the, as they say, the devil is in the details. So it is it can be a complicated question, but it's something that you need to let us know if there is anything else that you're receiving, and then we can work through you to see if it is something that is restricted or if it is something that we can work with. Okay, we've talked about the eligibility requirements that are common to all the Title 17 programs. So now we're going to move on to category specific requirements. And these are ones that the guidance breaks out per category. All right, we'll also walk through some of the changes as we go through these requirements for the categories. Let's go to the next slide. For 1703 programs, if you'll look back in memory to where we talked about the 4 categories, those are the top 3 categories that are under the section 1703. Now, those are innovative energy projects, innovative supply chain projects, and SEFI projects. So if a project is going to be eligible under any of these 3 categories, they must use at least one of the 13 statutory defined technologies that are illustrated on this page. Okay, I'll give you a minute just to take a look at those. All right, and when we talk about the 4th category that's under 1706, the EIR, or Energy Infrastructure Reinvestment Program, that is a program that has its own requirements. We'll get to that in a minute, but that does not prohibit it from taking advantage of any of these technology categories. So these categories, 1703 programs, as we've mentioned before, innovative energy, innovative supply chain, and SEFI under 1703 have to have at least one of these technologies. 1706 can have one of these technologies. It is not precluded from employing any of them. Okay. Let's go to the next slide. Now, we've talked before about LPO being the bridge to bankability. And we do that by supporting the deployment of innovative and high impact clean energy technologies so that these technologies can be demonstrated to private debt and equity investors. What we do is we give financing so that you have the space, the time to demonstrate that these technologies are bankable and that they're ready for large-scale deployment to support transition to a cleaner energy future. Now, these are things we've done before. It's fun to look back on history where we've demonstrated the ability to influence the debt and equity markets through the deployment of things like the first utility-scale wind and solar projects in the US. We've supported the next generation of advanced nuclear reactors. We've financed the nation's first clean hydrogen energy and storage project. And then again, going back to history, our financing of the utility-scale PV solar projects in 2011 transformed the US energy production in a way that few could have predicted. And what we're doing right now, what we're doing with you right now, is to build on that track record through the innovative energy projects category. Let's go to the next slide. We've talked about the common Title 17 requirements. And we've talked about that these projects must involve at least one of the 13 eligible technologies that we spelled out for you. We have expanded our ability to finance storage and critical minerals processing, manufacturing, and recycling in light of the demands that are being placed in these areas to support the transition to clean energy. But let's just get back to summary. The innovative energy projects have to deploy a new or significantly improved technology. And what's an easy way to think about this? You would need to have your project be one of the first 3 projects to deploy on a commercial scale in the US within the last 5 years. Now, we also recognize that the US is a big country. There can be regional variation that significantly affects the deployment of a technology. So we can still consider it innovative if, based on this regional differentiation, if no more than 6 projects total employ the same or similar technology, and no more than 2 projects that use the same or similar technology are located in the same region of the US as the project you are proposing. Now, that might be a little bit much to absorb just in the slide presentation, but again, we will go over through that with you as we work through your pre-application consulting or the application process for Title 17. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Now we're getting into the innovative supply chain projects. Now, the innovative supply chain project category provides loan guarantees for production facilities that manufacture projects or products with a 1703 eligible technology end use, including products or components related to industrial decarbonization technologies. And let's go to the next slide. As we did before, we have the common Title 17 eligibility requirements that the project has to satisfy. Now, when we're looking at the use for debt, for LPO debt here, we're looking at it as a way that can support the ramp-up production of key input and component manufacturing for eligible energy technologies. We can engage early with you as an applicant and address the chicken or egg situation through our flexible financing that private lenders typically don't provide to developers that establish the manufacturing capacity for innovative components of the low carbon supply chain. So if there's the chicken and egg issue, that's something where, again, we have the capability to step in and evaluate that situation, that risk, and potentially support your project to get over that point and to where you will be able to demonstrate that this is a commercially and technically viable project. Now, when we talk about, and a lot of times we talk about emissions just in general conversation, the focus is on power generation and personal vehicles and things like that. But here, when we're looking at supply chain projects, what we want to put the focus on is industrial decarbonization technologies. And we're encouraging applications relevant to the energy intensive and emissions intensive industries that DOE has identified. Sometimes they're referred to as hard to abate sectors. And these are ones that we really encourage you to bring us opportunities in these areas. And again, these sectors can include chemicals, iron and steel, aluminum, cement, paper and forest products, and foods and beverages, or food and beverages. Okay. Now we have also in here, we are looking to, given the need for critical minerals, again, to drive this, our energy transition forward. We also have a greater capacity for manufacturing and industrial decarbonization and critical materials within this category. All right, let's go to the next page. Yeah, here we come to stuff that's not revisiting the old, but here are new categories. Now here you'll find the state energy financing institution projects. Now this is the first of the new categories in the guidance. The lending authority under SEFI can be used to augment state-administered clean energy programs. What we're looking to do is provide additional financing to support projects that align federal energy priorities with those of the US states. Let's skip to the next slide. What is a SEFI? That's an entity established by a state or an Indian tribal entity or an Alaska Native corporation to provide financing support or credit enhancements for eligible projects and to take steps to reduce financial barriers to the deployment of existing and new eligible projects. Okay, now for a project to qualify, a SEFI-supported project needs to receive meaningful financial support or credit enhancements from a SEFI. What does that mean? Well, states are of different sizes, projects are of different sizes, etc., require different financing arrangements, etc. So what we're going to say that as a demonstration of meaningful financial support or credit enhancements is going to be looked at by LPO on a case-by-case basis, because we need to take into account the circumstances of the state, the nature of the project, and the position of the SEFI support in the capital stack. So what does that mean as far as possibilities, that things that could qualify as SEFI financial support? Well, it could be the SEFI could provide equity or a subordinate debt as their portion of the capital stack. A SEFI could provide a loan loss reserve with respect to the junior portion of the capital stack. It could co-lend with LPO, but just like with other projects, we're willing to be pari passu, or we would want to be senior. So let's say that the SEFI could come in at the MES level. The SEFI could provide financial backstop for specific key project elements that might be subject to regulatory or local market risk. And what does this mean for the types of SEFI projects that we're seeing and that we would like to entertain? You could bring us projects that talk about energy improvements for residential housing, community solar to expand access to solar power. We'll look at facilities that are related to decarbonized industrial products. We'll look at high quality new housing construction. And of course, we'll look at energy efficient or grid interactive devices. So we're excited to roll this out, and we've seen a lot of interest. We have information on the web, so we'll be very happy to go over any questions that you have if you just pop us an email or give us a call. Okay? Now, one thing to note is that two things. If you have a city and county agencies that are supporting a project, they will generally not qualify as a SEFI. We're looking at state level organizations or entities for the SEFI category. Also, there could be statewide policies that will end up with parties that are unrelated to the SEFI providing additional funding. Okay, and this could be, in general, these are not going to qualify or constitute meaningful SEFI support. Let's say that there's a statewide RPS policy. Generally, any support for the project that results from that policy would not be counted in towards the meaningful support from the SEFI entity. All right, let's head on to the fourth category, energy infrastructure reinvestment. Go to the next slide. Now, we have a new section, a new category. Under 1706 of Title 17, we are able to support energy infrastructure reinvestment projects. Now, this is you'll hear it referred to as EIR or 1706. And this is where we are excited to have the ability to support reinvestment in communities throughout the US, where there's existing energy infrastructure that's been challenged by market forces, resource depletion, age, technology advancements, or just the broader energy transition. And infrastructure that we're talking about here, again, is power plants, fossil fuel extraction sites, transmission systems, fossil fuel pipelines, refineries, other energy facilities. You know, just think of what you see out there that is either aging or is no longer viable in this new energy structure, etc. And then just think about what you can do with that existing infrastructure. Now, there are some cases where the infrastructure may have already ceased to operate, or it might continue to operate, but could benefit from, let's say, GHG or pollution-reducing improvements. Let's go to the next slide to talk about those. If you look in the left-hand column under the project eligibility, of course, it has to meet all of the common Title 17 eligibility requirements. But there are a few clauses, a few additional considerations that the ERI projects that are qualifying under the ceased operations requirement, a few additional requirements that they must meet. Now, the first thing is that the new or updated Title 17 financed infrastructure should be at or near the site of the legacy energy infrastructure. And that's so we can see it as a credible project that will retool, repower, or repurpose the energy infrastructure that ceased operations. When you file your application, make sure it shows a clear relationship between the new services and benefits that are going to be provided by the Title 17 financed infrastructure and the services and benefits that are lost from the legacy infrastructure. That includes if the replacement plan differs from the legacy infrastructure physically or geographically. So this is something where it needs to spell out that there's going to be a loss of some services and benefits potentially from the operations of the existing infrastructure, which will be replaced by new services and benefits. So we need to see that transition. We need to see the justification. We need to see the connection. When it comes to GHG life cycle analysis, we realize too that it might need to be adapted for some EIR projects that reinvest in qualifying energy infrastructure other than fossil fuel electricity generation, where a normal business as usual is not applicable. I mean, for an example, think about a project that is building new infrastructure at the site of old infrastructure that ceased operations. In this case, when the application is submitted, there is negligible GHG emissions from the old infrastructure, while the new investment is determined to serve the clean energy purposes and meet other Title 17 and EIR program objectives. So that's something where we would, that's a situation where we would adapt the approach based on the reality of the fact that you are taking old ceased operating infrastructure and replacing it. Now, let's say if you have a project that will invest in energy infrastructure that has ceased operations, which will generate electricity through the use of fossil fuels. Under that circumstances, we need to have you demonstrate that you will have controls or technologies that will avoid, reduce, utilize, or sequester air pollutants and anthropogenic emissions of greenhouse gases, which in shorthand we refer to as GHG emissions reductions. But that's something where if you're going to generate electricity with the use of fossil fuels, you need to demonstrate that you've got adequate technologies to avoid, reduce, utilize, or sequester air pollutants and GHG, okay? And then one other case that we'll talk about here. If you have an ERA project that involves an electric utility as the applicant, you need to provide assurance to DOE that the financial benefits that are received from the guarantee will be passed on to the customers of or the associated communities that are served by that utility. Okay, that's a lot to digest. And then I'll just have one last thing to note. Let me preview that with one of our usual sayings at LPO. It's never too early to call us. Never too early to explore an idea with us. And that applies especially to 1706, because these projects could be big and complex, and we are excited about deploying the funding to finance them. It's an incredible opportunity, one that I don't know if we'll see another one in our lifetime that's of this magnitude. The 1706 was authorized by the IRA. So there's a sunset date to the availability. We need to make sure that capital commitments are issued by September 30th of 2026. So even more than with our other programs, we encourage you to come to us sooner rather than later to explore the idea and then to get in the process of putting in an application so that we can consider it and potentially grant it. Okay, let's go to the next slide. All that detail aside, what types of projects can there be? There's a wide range of investments that we'll consider under EIR. That's, let's say, repowering or retooling energy infrastructure to restart or operate more efficiently this infrastructure more efficiently or at a higher output. It could be nuclear or wind facilities that we would be looking at in this area. We're also looking at replacing energy capacity or other grid services of retired energy infrastructure. We're glad to look at building new facilities for clean energy purposes that are going to utilize legacy infrastructure. We're looking to finance repurposing retired facilities or upgrading operating energy infrastructure for Title 17 qualified industrial purposes. Also want to note that environmental remediation at the sites of abandoned or uneconomic energy infrastructure and upgrades to this site are an eligible purpose as well for the financing. So this is something where we want to encourage you to come to us with the potential EIR projects. All right, let's go to the next slide. Now we can get the CFOs in the audience. Now it's time for you to pay more attention. We'll talk about just the loan overviews. First, this particular slide just covers common features of the Title 17 loans. One thing I'd mentioned earlier that LPO is a bank within the DOE. So as a bank, we generally issue project finance debt. So generally, we're going to be, I mean, there are other considerations where we might do a warehouse loan or a corporate loan, but generally think of us as a project finance lender. Therefore, we're looking at the cash flows. So all of these, we will give you our statutory limits as the terms that we can offer, but we're always looking at the cash flows of the project and the reasonable prospect of repayment when we structure these loans. But let's look at the left-hand column, and we'll start from the bottom up on this one. When we talk about Title 17, and probably during this presentation, I've talked about giving loans or loan guarantees. Everything that we do in Title 17 is a loan guarantee, but it just so happens that there could be that the loan could be issued by the federal financing bank, which is under the Treasury, and then we fully guarantee that loan. You don't have to apply to the Treasury, you go through us. So this is something where if we refer to giving you a loan under Title 17, this is what we're referring to. We also guarantee loans that are issued by a commercial lender, by a third party. So when we talk about guarantees or loans, that's what we're referring to. When we talk about when we can guarantee, when it's someone other than the government that's giving you the loan, when it is a commercial lender that we are guaranteeing, we can guarantee up to 90% of that loan. But we'll come back to that as we go through more specifics. Again, further up going up on the on the left-hand column, in general, there's no minimum or maximum loan size. Now, the total loan amount that we can give statutorily is up to 80% of total eligible project costs. We guarantee loans, again, up to 100% if we are issuing a loan to you through the Treasury, or up to 90% if it's a commercial loan. Now, and as I mentioned before, we typically structure our loans as project finance, meaning that we're looking at the cash flows that you're projecting and demonstrating to us over the life of the loan as a way that we can set our terms to make sure that there is a reasonable prospect that the loan will be serviced and repaid. Okay, so let's go to the next slide to go over the other fees. Actually, you know what? Go back up for one moment. We can talk about the rates. Thanks. Now, the rates on these loans, it's based on the Treasury rate. That's the same tenor of your loan, plus that cost of money, the 3/8 that we have listed on the slide, and then plus a risk-based charge that, just like a commercial bank would, that compensates us for the risk that we assess based on the analysis of your project. The rate at which we loan it is fixed at that time of issuance based on the Treasury that's in place at that moment. Now, of course, the maximum term that we could issue would be 30 years. Rarely would you go that far, but that's the farthest we can go. And again, that gives us a little bit more flexibility than commercial banks will generally go through. So for the rest, let's go to the next slide. Okay, here's something that is that's very important. Over the past few years, there have been changes to fees and costs. So we want to make sure that you understand what it is that the changes that we are implementing as of the issuance of the guidance. For applications fees, I think you'll be happy to know that those are eliminated. There are no application fees. For the advisor fees, these are fees that are coming in that start at that will start at the due diligence phase of a project. Now, the transaction costs, these transaction costs that are the costs of the independent financial, technical, or other consultants that we engage are spelled out in the guidance. These are once we have decided to retain an outside advisor for a project, that means once we are going into due diligence, the due diligence stage, the project sponsor will be required to execute an agreement to pay the advisor's fees and expenses. We need to make sure that this agreement is satisfactory to the Department of Energy. When you engage in these agreements and start to incur the costs, you can expect that those expenses will be in the range of $1 million to $3 million throughout the financial closing date. They'll accrue and be payable by you, the applicant, and that's going to be set forth in the terms set forth in your agreement with these advisors. And these fees will be incurred and paid whether or not the closing date does occur. Now, you will be happy to note that these third-party expenses do constitute eligible project costs, so they can be amortized in the loan itself. Okay, going down to the facility fee. These are due. These are similar to what you would face with a commercial loan. It's at 0.6% on the first $2 billion of the loan. And then for the portion of the guaranteed obligation that exceeds $2 billion, an additional 0.1 or 0.1%. And again, you would pay this at financial close of the transaction. There is a maintenance fee that you will be paying annually through the course of your loan. That covers the DOE's administrative expenses in servicing and monitoring the loan guarantee agreement from the execution of that agreement through the payment in full. And that's typically in the range of $150,000 to $200,000 per calendar year. And that's required, of course, annually after the closing. Now, this is spelled out in the guidance. And again, we invite you to give us any questions that you do have on these changes in the fees and costs. Okay. Let's go to the next slide. We've talked about the different stages I mentioned due diligence, financial close, pre-application consultations, etc. Now, the guidance document that we've been talking about relates mainly to steps 1 and 2 of this process, where you go through pre-application consultations, when you work with various parties at LPO to see if you're eligible, to build the strongest application, and then go through the first stage is the application process. Once you go through pre-application and submit your application and you go through part 1, you're determined to be technically eligible. Come into part 2, where you're determined to be technically adequate, commercially ready, and financially viable, etc. And then you move into the due diligence process, and that's where the term sheets are negotiated, where you'll be finalizing the credit rating on your project, etc. And you move from there into the conditional commitment, and then on to financial close. This is something where we can go through in a different scenario, but for today we're concentrating mainly on the pre-application and the application review process, because that's where the guidance is going to have the changes that affect you mostly. All right, so let's go on to the next slide, where we can go over some frequently asked questions. Right? How long does the application process take? It can take anywhere from 6 months to over a year. A lot of it depends on the preparedness of the applicant, responsiveness, other external factors that might affect you. You might be at the stage where you are in a position where it turns out that you are set for an equity capital raise, so you put your process on hold with the LPO application process until you have completed that project, etc. So a lot of it depends on you and your responsiveness and where you are in your project life cycle. But could take 6 months, could take 12 months, or could take longer. Again, much of it depending on your preparedness and your responsiveness. The fee structure, again, as we just went over, there are no application fees. You are responsible for third-party advisor costs, and they begin in the due diligence phase. You'll enter into an agreement that agreement is a standard type of agreement, and the rates there are rates that are competitive or reduced because of the government involvement. And that's something where you will go through and negotiate that agreement and pay those costs as they're incurred. You'll pay a facility fee and the maintenance fee, as we just discussed. We have, again, we talked about this before, the federal support restrictions. But again, this subject comes up frequently because it's a complicated type of question or of circumstances where we'll go through the details with you to make sure that we understand other support that you're getting, how it can interact with ours if it can, and if not, where are there considerations where after that support is exhausted, then you might be ready for us. It's very complicated, so we're ready to sit down and talk with you about it. Now, there's pursuant to the legislation that provides DOE with Title 17 loan authority, as we had mentioned at the beginning of this call, the DOE can issue loan guarantees to projects that are expected to benefit directly or indirectly from certain other forms of federal support. Again, we'll work with you to determine how these restrictions affect your project or your potential application. The specifics will differ project to project, and projects under certain categories have particular considerations. So I'm sorry if that seems more confusing than clarifying, but the underlying message is that you need to come and talk to us about this. Like there could be a SEFI project that can't use federally appropriated funds through repayment of a guaranteed loan, but the fact that the SEFI receives federal support at an organizational level or for projects other than the project that is applying for an LPO financing, that would not disqualify the proposed project, as long as the federal support to that SEFI does not directly or indirectly support the project that's in question. Right, so again, we encourage you to come to us and explore these options so that we can clarify how your other support could affect your application. Now, tax credits. These tax credits, we hear people referring to stacking types of benefits. Tax credits and other federal support can interact with the LPO program. So we do, but here's where I'd advise you to look at the Title 17 interim final rule. This clarifies, along with the guidance, on how Title 17 applicants interact with the program with respect to these potential tax credit benefits. Okay. So, do we have any further questions on the slide? Nope, I don't think so. Okay, so let's recap the transaction costs, because again, this is something that we come back to frequently. LPO is reverting to the previous practice of requiring applicants to enter into sponsor payment letters, and you'll be paying these, and you'll pay these costs as incurred. Now, these do represent costs that can be amortized into the loan, so we want to make sure that you do understand that as well. Okay. Now, coming back to these are the administrative expenses or the third-party costs are not like other administrative costs of the Department of Energy Loan Guarantee Program. So that way they can be included as eligible project costs. So that is something where I'm getting a chat that's a question that somebody is reiterating. Okay. So we thank you for being here today. We want to make sure that that you see how to contact us. Let's go to the next slide. And there are a couple of ways to set up an appointment with us so that we can talk through your project or any other or if you're advising people, project you're advising them on, or any other questions that you may have. So there is a link here where you can go to what we call the PARC pages, the pre-application consultation request pages, or a page on the web. And you'll see links there where you can pick out a particular loan program, click the link, and then you'll fill out a little bit of information that will come to us, and we'll be able to be informed ahead of time on what your general area is, that we can make sure that we target the right people to respond to your request. And we'll get back to you and set up a conversation and see if there's a potential path we can explore. You can also give us a call or send us an email, and we'll respond that way as well. But the most efficient way is to go to the website, where again, you'll give us the information that we need, and we can make sure that we come to you with an basic understanding of the type of questions you might ask and who it might be best to have the consultation with on our team. We also encourage you to download the guidance document. We're providing that link for you. To learn more about the LPO programs on our website, and also want to emphasize that you can download the IFR, take a look at it, and send us your comments no later than July 31st. The more comments that we have, the better the IFR can serve the people who are going to be using it and benefiting by it. And that's you, because you have the ideas. We enable, we finance, we'll help you carry it forward. But what we want to do is make sure that we structure this program to serve you as well as possible. Okay, I think we're at the, no, we have a couple more minutes. I'm seeing a question about the terms of the transactions. Let's go back to slide 16. Okay, now with the terms of the loans, with the guidance talks about the use of a risk-based charge that allows LPO to offer loans that more closely mirror private sector lenders. Now, private sector lenders, if you go to them with a transaction, they'll look at the creditworthiness and the potential risk, and generally they'll charge a rate that accounts for the risk, the increased risk that project or that loan might entail to them. So then the LPO is doing the same thing again, so you know what you can expect when you come to us. When you're talking about the length of the loan, what's the tenor that we might come to you with? That depends on the project needs on one hand. What is it that is needed to support your project? It depends on the expected asset life. And it depends on the cash flows that the project is generating, so that we can make sure that we tailor the financing to the best that we can to support the project. Again, our mission is only achieved when you achieve your mission. So we will try to be flexible in the tenor that we set to make sure it supports your project. But then on the other hand, we also need to account for the fact that it's our other duty to make sure that we give a reasonable prospect, we structure it so that we have a reasonable prospect of repayment. So that, again, we will look at the cash flows of that transaction and see what it is, the tenor that those cash flows can support. Welcome, and we look forward to doing business with you. Thank you so much for joining and sending your questions, and send us a request for a pre-application consultation, and we'll be right with you.